So this is the masthead of William Lloyd Garrison's original abolitionist newspaper, but it's colorized because it's the Liberator dot today. To try and understand what hope is, it can be helpful to explore what it is not. And so we commonly say that the opposite of hope is despair or hopelessness. We've had an episode or two where we've discussed the nature of hopelessness. But to leave hope and despair as our only two opposites results in hope being a flat, two-dimensional phenomenon. Surely hope is more full-bodied than an either-or choice, a yes or no decision. Thomas Aquinas lists 4 characteristics of hope, which result in 4 opposites for our consideration. Let's call these characteristics dimensions. Hope is a 4-dimensional condition that has some freedom of movement. My name is Lowell Bliss. Welcome to episode 44 of the Liberator Today's video series on hope. In episodes 31 and 32, we looked at a couple perspectives, Michael Scott Moore's and Margaret Wheatley's, which actually called hope bipolar. In other words, occupying 2 opposite poles. And the poor hostage in Moore's case, or the burned out activist in Wheatley's case, find themselves flitting between the 2 poles of hope and despair. It's exhausting. We've all been there. But whereas Moore and Wheatley suggest that you abandon a hope-despair perspective altogether, I would suggest that you just give that one particular axis a break for a while. Hope, according to Aquinas, participates in more axes than just the one with despair. What I know about Aquinas' teaching on hope I've received through this book, Though the Fig Tree Does Not Blossom, Towards a Responsible Theology of Christian Hope by Ellen Ott Marshall. She summarizes vast swaths of Aquinas' Summa Theologia. If you wish to explore Aquinas for yourself, you can find his teaching on hope in these questions here that I list on the screen. The first characteristic of hope is that one hopes for a future good, not a future evil. This distinguishes hope from fear, since fear anticipates evil in one's future. The second characteristic of hope is that one hopes for a future good, not a present good. This characteristic, according to Aquinas, distinguishes hope from joy, which, quote, regards a present good that is already possessed. These 2 characteristics alone allow us to draw out a graph with good and evil on one axis and the present and the future on the other. Anticipation of a future evil puts fear in one quadrant. Possession of a present good puts joy in another quadrant. Hope is in the quadrant of imagining a future good. That leaves one quadrant unlabeled, but we could maybe write in grief for how we respond to a present evil. Grief, one could easily argue, is the opposite of joy on the good-evil axis in the present quadrants, and is the opposite of fear on the present future axis in the evil quadrants. Adding grief somewhere on our graph is certainly in keeping with how Walter Brueggemann understands the movement of hope. The proper and helpful response to a present evil condition is not denial, but rather grief. These first 2 characteristics and their opposites of joy and fear at least turn the picture of hope into a plane, P-L-A-N-E, to use geometry terms. We no longer have simply a bipolar line. You don't need to feel whipped between 2 points. But Aquinas still has 2 other characteristics for hope. So while a plane gives us more elbow room, we can still experience even more freedom of movement with hope. A third characteristic of hope is that the object of hope is, quote, arduous and difficult to obtain. We do not speak of anyone hoping for trifles, Aquinas says, which are in one's power to have at any time, unquote. Aquinas calls this desire. If the object is easy to obtain, one is expressing desire. If difficult, then hope. The fourth characteristic is that however difficult it may be, hope imagines that the obtaining of one's object is indeed possible. The opposite here is despair, which thinks attainment of one's object is impossible. We can construct a second grid with difficult and easy on the y-axis and impossible and possible on the x-axis. Desire is for objects which are easy and possible. Despair is for objects imagined to be not just difficult, but also impossible. Hope deals with the difficult, but yet possible. That again leaves one quadrant, yet unlabeled. It seems strange to talk about something that is easy to obtain and yet impossible to attain. I want to put the word denial in here, so as to again rope in Walter Brueggemann's teaching. Denial believes that some good is easy to obtain or to preserve, and yet the truth of the matter, reality dictates that it is impossible. The denialist is living in a fantasy world of easy impossibilities. When we take our two grids, our two planes, and intersect them at hope, we've created what we might call the shape of hope, compared and contrasted with fear, desire, joy, despair, denial, and grief on multiple sides. There's a dimensionality. Hope and fear are opposites when it comes to evil and good, but they share something in common, namely the future perspective. Hope and joy are opposites when it comes to time frame, but share the good in common. Even hope and despair are often poised as exclusive opposites, but they also share a recognition that the object of hope is arduous and difficult to obtain. Aquinas succinctly sums up the shape of hope as this: the object of hope is a future good, difficult but possible to obtain. So what does that mean practically? Next week, let's play around with this strange shape. I think we'll find that hope having a shape can give hope for having hope. That's next week. I'm Lowell Bliss, Christian environmental missionary and climate activist. Thank you for visiting the Liberator.